you were gonna kill that deer?
Did I ever think I was gonna kill him? Early on, maybe, but throughout the whole journey, I'd say no. Yeah, we put ourselves in the best position to do it and be in the game, but I don't think I ever believed I was actually gonna kill him. This piece of property that we're on is brand new to me. I just got permission to hunt it this year, so I have no idea how it hunts. And the challenging part is it's a lot of rows of trees that aren't very old, so I'm not even sure there's a single tree that's huntable on this farm.
No way.
Guess who finally showed up on my cameras? All right, here we are, less than a week away from Iowa's opener. This farm's gonna be a challenge to hunt, no doubt about it. But the kicker is, just as of recent, there's a giant showing up on camera. And I've known about this deer for a number of years, as have a lot of people in the neighborhood. The main target for tonight and for the season really is a really big deer. In fact, it's probably the biggest deer I've ever hunted. Well, this is officially the craziest thing I've ever done.
TNT's in the beans.
I finished my last vlog basically talking about how I was going to play it smart and try to eliminate any mistakes, and here I am getting as aggressive as you possibly can on this one. Every hunt for this deer is this wild. It's going to be a fun ride. Here we are, almost 2 years removed from this chase for this buck we called TNT that Grant and I endured during the 2019 season. And we're just kind of reflecting back on it. It's always good to look back on these journeys, talk about what we learned, that type of stuff. This was the biggest deer I've ever hunted. I've only ever had 2 deer in that 200-inch range on camera. One was that Prodigy buck, and I wasn't even going to shoot him. So technically this is the only 200-inch deer that I've ever targeted. So it taught me a lot, and there's probably a lot of things that we haven't discussed in depth. So today we have Max and our new intern Josh, who were somewhat removed from the story and were more like the average viewer trying to follow along. And so I'm sure, just like all the viewers, these guys would have questions about what Grant and I went through during that season, and we're just kind of going to talk through it and reflect back on. I haven't watched these videos in forever, so it'll be a lot of fun, kind of looking back through these.
So here's a clip from October 3rd of your first encounter with TNT.
Well, this is officially the craziest thing I've ever done. We were pushing in, trying to find a spot to hunt from the ground. And finally found a spot, but I was going to have to go and cut down a bunch of tall grass that's in front of us so I could shoot. And I was just about to walk up there and heard a deer cough about within 20 yards over in the CRP. It's so crazy to look at that from that angle because I felt so good up in that tree. And I talk about it, I say how good a cover I have, but man, it looks ridiculous from your angles. Prairie grass. So we stopped right where we were.
and there's these two tiny little willows that I'm sitting in. And I originally just wanted to climb up and see if I could see if it was this big deer bedding right out here. I can't see the deer, but I got up here and realized it's actually pretty comfortable and I can shoot just fine. I'm like not even 5 feet off the ground, but there's enough cover. I hope there's enough cover to make it work. And I don't have to trim anything because now I can shoot over the grass. So this is going to be a pretty intense hunt. And Grant and I aren't going to be able to talk a whole lot because Grant's going to be on the ground. But if he does what he's been doing out on this path, we should be on the game. So it's going to be pins and needles the rest of the night.
You want to talk about off the wall?
Oh my gosh.
And what's crazy too is or at least I'd be interested to get your opinion. I fully believed that we were going to see him that night.
Oh, I did too.
We had some trail cam intel, and we're starting to put the pieces together that was the area he liked to spend a lot of time, and there just weren't any options there to hunt like you normally would.
Right,
and we eventually found the tree that was on the other side of that little path, but we couldn't hunt it that night with that wind. So on that side of the path, I mean, that was as good of any option, but man, to think we actually, what would have happened if we pulled that off that night?
That would have been nuts. You know, I had hunted with you a few times up to that point, but I'd watched the daily blogs like years prior leading up to my internship. That was my internship year, 2019 season. Yeah. And, you know, so I kind of knew a little bit of your style just from watching your vlogs, how you hunted and everything, but I had never seen you hunt like that before.
I was going to say, I wouldn't even consider that my style. That was outside of anything I've ever done, and it was fresh off another trip from Montana, elk season, hunting that way, and I kind of brought that back to the whitetail world. But I would say it wasn't necessarily a change in style, but it was like a forced hunting style because of that property. And I've talked about it a lot before, but you know, there are just things that we did throughout that whole season that was very out of the box, just out of the ordinary. But
to be honest though, I think that's what made, at least for me anyway, I think that's what made chasing that deer so much fun, is the unique setups that we had to do for that deer and the situations that he put us in, you know.
For sure.
I think for me that was the best part about chasing that deer, for sure.
And it's funny to think from a cameraman standpoint, here you are, a brand new intern, we're trying to teach you the Midwest Whitetail style and throw you into this, and it's like, you'll probably never do this again in your life, like something along those lines.
That was probably the most nerve-wracking thing for me was, you know, prior to the internship, I did not have a ton of experience behind a camera. And, you know, opening day, you know, we're chasing a 200-inch deer. And, you know, I'd never even laid eyes on a 200-inch deer, let alone hunted a 200-inch deer. So you can imagine how nervous I was being thrown into a situation like that, you know, trying to film when I really have no experience at all.
Like you said, it made for a fun chase, and it kind of put it in perspective. It makes tree stand hunts a little more boring after what we got to experience that year.
You know, moving forward in that hunt, you know, one of the things that stuck out most to me was hearing those deer sparring. Do you remember that? Just the density that I remember hearing. I could tell, like, you could tell that there was two heavy deer.
I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah.
And even you go back a little bit before that, and we heard the deer cough as I was trying to set up.
Right.
So I was like, God, we're close to something. Don't know what it is. We're in his, what we think his bedroom.
Right.
Hear a deer cough within bow range to be able to hear that. But then, the sparring, we knew. And we don't even have confirmation that it was him, but we saw him shortly after and assumed that it was him.
That 3-year-old that we saw, did we see him before the sparring, or did we see him after?
It was before. Because it was like he came up and sparred with whatever was close to us.
Yeah.
And then they both went across the beans.
And then after that, I mean, the chase was on.
Yeah, it's like, I watched that and I look back on it and I'm like, that was crazy. But in the moment, I never hesitated. I never thought twice about, and that's an example of what that deer forced us to do. And that property, I should say, more the property, not the deer, forced us to do. Like, I would never do that on a normal property. I'd be like, okay, I saw him, good encounter, let's make an adjustment on the next one. That one, I was like, I gotta kill this deer now. Like, we have to take advantage of any close encounter, any sighting. We gotta try to make it happen, because your options were just so limited. We couldn't just like, oh, he went this way, we'll just adjust and go to a tree over there. There wasn't a tree over there. So we truly had to just all out go for it. I mean, it was crazy, and it's not a typical scenario, but it was how that chase was defined for sure.
Right.
Jared, knowing that was the biggest deer you ever chased, did that put a little extra pressure on you and make you kind of lean toward making some of those rash decisions, like jumping up in a willow tree?
I don't think it was the fact that it was the biggest deer I ever chased. I think it was because it was, I love targeting individual deer, and so he was at the top of the hit list. I mean, he could have been 20 inches smaller, and if he was still at the top of the hit list, I was going to do what I could do. And like I said before, it wasn't always the deer that made us do those things. It was the property. The property forced it. And all along, we had this conversation so many times. We knew our best chance was early.
Right.
Once the rut came around, once November hit, it was anybody's game. And there's so many people that knew about the deer and that were hunting the deer that our chances were going to basically go down day by day. And so that played a big part into why we did what we did.
And I think, me included, I think a lot of people shy away from getting that aggressive that early. But, if I was in your shoes, I probably wouldn't have done it any other way. I mean, we knew exactly where he was bedded. He was bedded like within a 50-yard circle right beside that pond every single time. And, come November, like you said, who knows where he's going to be at. And really, the number of pictures we got of him fell drastically, I feel like, once November hit.
For sure.
And our last encounter, I think, was like October 25th. So,
right.
I mean, why not go in there and get aggressive on him while you know where he's at?
Yeah, we were 100% right in how that played out.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I don't have any regrets doing what we did in early October.
Yeah.
Here's a scene from your second encounter on October the 16th.
All right, another aggressive move on this big deer tonight. It's October 16th, and Grant and I found a small pin oak to hang in that's a little bit downwind of where we think this deer's bedding. The weather's great, and a nice northwest wind. It's going to die down a little bit closer to sunset. It's pretty cool in the 40s, so that's all good. Sometimes I have a great feeling about these risky, aggressive moves, and sometimes I'm wondering what in the world I'm doing, and this is one of the latter. Just don't have a good feeling about tonight, and I know for a fact we're going to get busted by some deer at some point, just because we're kind of giving up everything behind us here and just banking on him being out in front of us. But I decided to do this tonight just because I want to hunt him on his pattern and not have to worry about where he's going based on a doe. So I figured my time is limited to be able to do that, and getting aggressive right now is my best chance at this deer while I know the area he's using. Just because, again, I've talked about it before, but there's other people hunting this deer, so I think time is kind of working against us. So we'll see how tonight goes. It's very, very aggressive and risky, and like I said, we're gonna spook some deer tonight. I'm sure of it. But hopefully, we don't spook the one we're hunting.
So that sums it up pretty good. Like our whole mentality on the chase, and it's such a hard question. I think about a lot of guys are in this situation. If you're hunting a small property, you have a deer that's on your property that you want to kill early on, late October is your best chance. Mid to late October, the month of October really is your best chance. And depending on cold fronts and stuff like that, you can make calculated risks. But everything's a wild card when it comes to November. That tree was probably the best one on the property. That one, and then the one up on the north end by the path.
How confident were you with the location of that tree?
To see him, really confident.
Yeah.
To get him in bow range, and not very confident.
That's the same way I felt. I feel like that tree, that location that we hunted, and then the blind location, I felt like going into those hunts, I feel like I was least confident in those hunts, just because really there's no way to force a deer movement through where those areas are, in my opinion, besides the beans. You know, the south plot where we were hunting, you know, we obviously were hunting over a food source, but, you know, to your left, if they walked past you, they were within bow range. If they were walking in that field, there's kind of like a little pinch right there. And then the same thing on the north side. We got so many pictures of him working those scrapes up and down that road, that north road bed.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that was going to be real close encounters, but those were my two favorite spots. I didn't really have a ton of confidence with this spot.
Yeah, the property in general didn't have much for pinch points, not much for force movement. But it's one of those things, you go sit in the little pinch where you can only see a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
And that doesn't, those hunts, you may have a better chance of shooting him, but if you don't see him, it does you no good.
Right.
Whereas if we're trying to see how he gets from point A to point B, we got to see him.
Right.
And so that's why I probably gravitated more to those open area spots than the smaller, lower visibility ones. I don't think it necessarily hurt us. You know, sometimes we guess the wrong spot, but there's just kind of the nature. And that property, again, he could travel wherever he wanted, so I don't think he did the same thing very often. I think he took different routes to get from one end to the other.
Right.
And if it would have helped too if we could have seen where he went. You know, that first encounter when he went across the beans and we chased him down, we were just a little bit too far behind him. He had gotten past by the time we got there. If we could have seen where he went, that might have been helpful for that next time we hunted that tree. Because he could have went by that tree, but he could have also been quite a ways left or right of it.
Yeah.
How crucial was trail cam info to your strategy, or to recognizing that this deer was living on you?
It was huge. We based a lot of our moves off of the trail cam movement, but I will say that, you know, it took a lot of work to get those cameras in position for them to be beneficial for us. You know, we had to move cameras around to find the sweet spot. And so that was definitely some work on our end, some risky moves, moving cameras around that close to season and then into the season like that. But it ultimately, that's what has to happen. And all deer are different. They bed in different spots year to year. You don't, at least for me, I don't just put a trail camera up in the same spot every time. I move it around based on where a certain deer likes to spend time or live. So it took some figuring out, not having any history hunting this deer, figuring that type of stuff out with the cameras.
What kind of precautions were you taking when you were making these trail cam moves right around or even into the season?
For the most part, we tried to do it like before rain. A couple times I remember doing it that way. We tried to use a UTV to get where we needed to and not leave a bunch of ground scent. You know, even reaching to the tree from the side of the UTV, so we never actually got out. You know, things like that. I'm sure we didn't do it every single time. It was just kind of the nature of we had to move cameras when we were out there, but we tried to be smart about it.
I remember, I think it was like the first time after we got a picture of him, that very next time we went to go check trail cameras. I think I like started to get out of the UTV or something. Like, no, stay in.
That's the advantage of doing it on UTV instead of walking to those spots. Is just don't leave that scent on the ground right there. You just keep them comfortable, keep them coming to that spot once you know they're close by.
So here's another clip from the second encounter as well on October 16th.
I mean, right where we thought he'd be. Right where we thought he'd be. I hate to get down too early, but if he starts going that way too far, I'm going to. worth a shot. I like our chances better of that than I do of me on the ground.
That was a confirmation encounter there. That was one of those. Okay, he came out of that bedding area again. That's where he's spent a lot of time. That's where he's cored up at right there. So it was good to see that confirm it. There was a lot of questions, I think, throughout that night of what the best thing to do is. Should we get down and try to get in front of him where he's going? And it was, we're fighting the impending darkness. Call to him, not call to him. There's just a lot of kind of questions that hindsight's 2020 always on those type of things.
Are you glad that you didn't go around and try to get on the ground and circle around him?
Yeah, because it was similar to what we talked about before. It's so open. He could literally walk anywhere.
Right.
So if I was like, okay, I know where he's going, then maybe, but we had zero clue where he was going.
Right.
He wasn't even on a mission. He was just kind of browsing a little bit by himself, just kind of a got up out of bed, lazy movement type of pattern.
Yeah, I think that was the right call, just because we could have got on the ground and ended up bumping him or something. And I think up to that point, he really didn't know we were hunting him, really, in my opinion.
Right.
So I think that was a good call. Just no harm, no foul on that.
Yeah, and when I talked about, I think you can hear me say, like, I don't want to get down too early. I wasn't talking about getting down and going after him. I was talking about getting down and getting out of there before getting off the farm, before he started coming down close to us. He was so far away that we could easily sneak out the back door undetected, where if he comes down, we get stuck in the tree well after dark till we can't see him anymore, and we get down and he's right there or something. That's where we're going to get in trouble. But for me, it was just at that point when that sound bite, I was talking about getting down and getting out of there.
Okay, so I misunderstood that. I thought you were talking about getting down and trying to circle around.
I was meaning get down, get off the farm before, while there's no deer close. We're going to spook anything, at least while we're there, we get off the property. But when I say I didn't want to get down too early, I didn't want him to all of a sudden change his mind and come, and us be on the ground when he's coming. So that's kind of what I was thinking there.
So at this point, right after that clip there, this would be the first time you've called to this deer, correct?
I think so, yeah. Yeah. And it was one where I wasn't even sure that I was going to call to him. It was like we were really indecisive for a long time in the tree whether we wanted to or not. But it was also one of those situations that I would have regretted probably not calling to him more than I did calling to him and it not working out. So I ended up calling to him, ended up rattling to him, and in the tree, he was probably 250, 300 yards away. I didn't know if he heard it, or if he was just didn't care. I was kind of hoping he didn't hear it at all, but after reviewing the video when we got back, he definitely heard it. You can see his ears pinned back towards our location. But it was one of those take note, okay, there's something going on over there, but I'm busy right now, or I'm not in the mood right now, and potentially he went there after dark. I don't know. I hate those situations, but again, by himself or right on the cusp of the pre-rut time period, you never know. I've seen it work that time of year before. So to me, it was worth the risk of him possibly coming and encountering our ground scent after dark, just to kind of testing the water, seeing if he was in the right mood to at least come get curious enough. And we didn't do an all-out rattling brawl. It was more of a sparring. Hey, there's a couple bucks over here, close to your territory. Why don't you come check them out? And again, we don't know if he came by after dark. I would not be surprised if he came and checked it out later that night.
So here's a clip from your third encounter on October 19th.
So I want to know what you're thinking. Like, I want to know. I almost wanted to be in your shoes more than mine at that time.
So first of all, I'm like at least 250, 300 yards away. and my heart is beating out of my chest, and I can't even imagine what you're thinking, you know.
Yeah.
Who
But
saw the deer first?
We don't know.
I don't know. I don't remember.
I'm assuming you did, just because
Yeah.
you're elevated.
Right.
But it
The
couldn't
first
have been
time
much
I
longer.
could see him, I could literally just see his antlers coming through the grass.
Did you see the doe early?
I never saw it though, which
So
I don't.
that's crazy. I'm wondering if the beans were too tall or something.
Yeah.
But he came out right behind a doe. A doe came shooting out of the grass, and she turned and walked perfectly broadside. I could have shot her, but the way she came running out of that grass, I knew there was something behind her, and I was like, that doe came out of his bedroom. It's got to be him right there.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting you couldn't see the doe, but the doe did exactly what we needed. Come out, turn broadside,
Right.
away from me, quartering away, shot it 30 yards probably. But yeah, I was definitely thinking, and it's so hard being, we've used to filming hunts right next to each other, about this close to each other, and used to being able to talk and be like, just gauge each other's reactions and all that. But this was like, I have no idea what Grant sees.
Right.
I'm assuming he's got a good angle of this, but it was nerve wracking not knowing what each other, what we were thinking. Well, I hadn't even been set up for 10 minutes. Look at the feet right there.
Look at the
Just
feet.
came out.
Looks like you want to cry.
And he saw me before I saw him. So he was locked onto me, but he wasn't sure what I was.
All right, so I know that a lot of people are wanting to know this question, but do you think? I mean, obviously, my view is a lot different from the deer's view.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that if you would have had a ghillie suit on, he would have been a little bit more forgiving?
So, if I could do it over again, I probably would, because I don't think it would hurt anything. But you hear me say right there in that interview that he was locked onto me. And I watched the footage back, the raw footage, and I don't think he ever was. You can watch his eyes and his body language, and he never really locks on my location. So I don't think he ever saw me, and he wouldn't walk. He was actually getting closer and closer and closer. So if he had spotted me right away, he wouldn't have done that.
Right.
There were times where I was looking through that bush, and I was just watching his rack, so I could see which way his head was oriented.
Right.
Based on his rack, and a lot of times it was facing me, but I never actually could see his eyes. The camera can see his eyes a lot better and where he's actually looking. And so I don't think he ever locked on me. I think what it was is he likely heard some noise when I was setting up. I had to smash some of that tall native grass down to be able to shoot out there. And so I think he was coming to investigate that.
Yeah.
That's my best guess, is he was coming to investigate some of the noise and stuff that was going on right there.
Had you used a ghillie suit at that point in your career? I remember you borrowing mine, I think right around that time. I don't know if you even...
I think it was after that encounter, wasn't it?
No, I don't think I borrowed yours until I moved on to the other deer.
To the Big Ten.
To the Big Ten.
Yeah, I remember you borrowing them, and I'm like, I can't believe you don't have this set yet.
Yeah, no, I borrowed yours after this deer. And again, like I said, if I didn't own a ghillie suit at that time, I might have tried it, but I've got all kinds of comments about should have been wearing a ghillie suit, should have been wearing a camel hat, et cetera, but I don't think he ever saw me. And when I came to full draw, it was a last ditch.
Right.
Maybe he'll stop. He had already busted. After he busted, that's when I stood up and came to full draw. So that's not why. He circled downwind, got my wind, busted, and then I stood up and drew just in case he would stop and turn and look at me, which he obviously never did.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed this? But what's so weird to me is, I think you can see at the beginning of this video, but he is looking directly at me.
I know.
And I've never, I don't know why.
No, you were inside the blind. There's no reason, but I don't know, coincidence or what. So basically I can say he locked on you and you spooked him, right?
How frustrating was it, Grant, for you? I know, like, being a camera guy, I've been there, the separation is miserable. It's terrible. How frustrating was it for you not
That's-
knowing if Jared's
yeah.
gonna just stand and draw or?
That's what's so hard about like being a cameraman, especially with the willow tree situation too. I mean, we were right there close with the willow tree, but we were still pretty far separate. So it's not like if we would have had a deer within range, there's no way we would have been able to communicate in that scenario. And that's what's hard is just, you know, not knowing what each other is going to do. I mean, I could have a totally different view from what Jared has. And I mean, that's just part of one of the many situations that deer put us in. That's why, again, that's why it was so fun to chase that deer, is because those kind of situations.
Yeah, you at least can't have the two-way conversation. Like a lot of times you can have the cameraman, because we're wearing wireless mics, you can have the cameraman wearing headphones, and the hunter could be like, okay, I'm gonna shoot, or you know, whatever it is, or he's out in the field. But you just don't get that communication back. So that's where the challenge comes in. And there's certain situations where the cameraman can be right with you like this, but there's certain times where you need the cameraman to be able to see more than you can,
Right.
just from a filming standpoint.
All right, here's a clip from your 4th encounter on October 25th.
All right, October 25th, afternoon hunt. We're all saddled in, ready to go. Right after I finished the morning hunt, I looked at the forecast, and it was the complete opposite of what it was supposed to be this afternoon. It was supposed to be strong east winds, and instead we have a really, really, really light northwest wind that's basically going to switch to southeast by the end of the night, but super light and variable. So I think the wind's just going to do circles all night. So for that reason, I elected to still come to this same little blind that I would have on a strong east wind. Put this blind up in September. It's just on the edge of these beans in this little cedar thicket, and after checking cameras, he has been in this spot the last couple days. Once was a little bit after dark, and once was about 7 or 8 minutes before legal shooting ended. So if he does that again, we'll be in the game. I got about a 35-yard shot to the little scrape he's been working. So we'll see how tonight goes. I, of course, would rather be in a tree where we could see a little bit more, but like I said, I could not take any chances with the wind just doing circles, so there's no way we'd be able to get away with anything. We got 2 ozonics running in here. We washed all our clothes this afternoon, sprayed down really good. We're doing everything we can to try to beat these deer's noses tonight. So we'll see what happens. We had a good hunt this morning with a lot of pre-rut like activity, so I know they're getting excited, moving around a little more. Hopefully this big deer does the same.
I can't remember where he popped out of at first.
So yeah, I mean, this is, out of all the encounters, this is the one I thought it was over.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, you know, we had trail cam evidence of him working that scrape that's right there in recent days, and he came out. I could just barely see him over the horizon. With where you were at with the camera, you couldn't see him, but he turned. He was coming up, so there was just a little bit of a rise there, and he was below it. And when I saw him, he was coming up towards us.
Yeah.
But what killed us was there was a group of does, I was like a good 100 yards past him coming down the path. And they couldn't see each other at the same time, but they got to a spot where they basically intercepted and he could see him. I couldn't see him below the hill, but I'm assuming he turned and followed them out. But I thought he was coming. I was getting ready, getting myself positioned for a shot for when he popped up right at that scrape. And I thought it was over. And it was just unfortunate you couldn't see just because of the angle and the camera and stuff. But man,
yeah, I guess that's why I thought we weren't nearly in the game as I thought we were, because like I've like you said, I never saw him, but the first time I saw him, he was like probably 250 yards out in the field the first time I saw him.
Right. Yeah, but that was after he followed the does out there, and we eventually could see him. He was still with a doe out there.
Yeah.
So he was following them around, but it was just bad timing, you know, that if those does weren't coming down the hill at that exact time, I'm fully convinced he was on his way up to work that scrape that we were hunting.
Right.
So just bad timing on that one, and that was probably the most, like I said, the most confident I was that we were about to get a shot at him.
Well,
Was there no opportunity for calling in that scenario, in that encounter?
No, one of the biggest things was we didn't know where he was at, because last I saw him he was 60 yards coming at us, and then we probably went what,
yeah.
I don't know,
It
it seemed
was a
like forever,
while.
but 20
Yeah.
plus minutes without seeing him, and then next thing we know he's dogging a doe through the native grass.
So looking back on it now, what was your greatest takeaway from the chase of this deer?
My greatest takeaway, well, one, I learned that I do not like hunting deer with a lot of attention around them that the whole neighborhood knows about and all that. But I think the greatest takeaway for me was, well, a new style of hunting, for one. I'd never hunted whitetails that way. So it forced me to be aggressive, forced me to hunt in different locations with different styles. So I learned a lot from that aspect. There wasn't a ton of like eye-opening things, but there's a lot of confirmations for me. One being what we talked about the whole time with regards to them becoming a wild card in November. I knew it was part of the story. I knew that my time was limited. Every day our chances got lower. As we inch closer to November, it was going to be anybody's guess where that deer was. And in fact, after the neighbor killed him, we did learn that there was another person that was, man, a long ways away, multiple miles away, that had a picture of him a few days before that. And so that it's just proof right there that once you get that time frame, they could go anywhere, and it's all based on a doe, and that stuff is magnified, like I said earlier, on a small property. And that property doesn't hold a lot of deer in general, so I knew that our best chance was in October. And I've said before, I didn't have any regrets with what we did. You know, I enjoyed that aggressive style. I didn't fully believe we ever had a really good chance, but that's kind of the case always with me and deer that I'm chasing. You lose way more than you win, and so that naturally I think you don't have a full belief in it. But yeah, I'd say that was the biggest takeaway for me, is a more aggressive style of hunting, that you're never as limited as you think you are. I'll put it that way. There's always something you could do, whether it's hunting from the ground, hunting from a smaller tree. You know, a lot of people maybe would have looked at that situation like, well, I don't know how to hunt this deer. There's just no trees. There's no obvious pinch points or anything like that. There's always something you can do. If the deer's there, you have a chance. And so I think that's probably one of the bigger overarching takeaways I had. And so I guess building on that too, maybe you have something to add, like from a cameraman standpoint, and I mean, you were just as much a part of the chase as a hunter as I was. So what types of things did you take away from it?
Yeah, so mine's a little bit more geared towards the filming aspect of it. Like I said before, you know, going into the internship, I really didn't have a ton of experience with the camera. But honestly, in my opinion, that 2019 season couldn't have went any better as far as like a growing aspect as far as me with the camera. Because like I said before, some of the situations, the setups we were in, some of the situations that deer put us in, you know, hunting out of a willow tree, hunting in trees that are as big as my arm. I mean, with any little gust of wind, I mean, you're like this the whole time, you know. To hunting out of a tripod stand. I mean, all those scenarios allowed me to become a better cameraman. I think the reason why that season was so beneficial for me too is that season allowed me to have a passion of telling a story, because you know, that the excitement I had going into each hunt, chasing a 200-inch deer, I mean, you want to portray that to your audience as best as you possibly can, because I mean, the excitement is you can't even explain it. You know, and
you feel like you never do it justice, but you try as best as you can.
And now I look back on it, even now, and we were talking about this earlier, like, what was that, as far as like the editing and standpoint and all that stuff, I'm like, what was I doing right there, you know? So it's great to, you know, go through situations like that and learn from them, and that's what allowed me to become a better cameraman, I guess. So.
Yeah, I think it was baptism by fire for you, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's not the way we wanted the story to end, but in all reality, I'm probably happier this way that it did end like that, because I think you learn more from the failures than you do the successes. And
right.
I think starting out hunting that deer that way played a big part in my aggressiveness towards the Big Ten the following year too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big believer in what you can learn. That's the key to failures, especially in hunting, is what can you take away from it? What can you
Right.
learn from it? So that chase for that big deer was the epitome of that, and a lot of takeaways, a lot of up and downs. It was your stereotypical roller coaster ride for sure. But hopefully we'll get another chance to chase another animal like that, and just keep telling the stories. That's a fun part of what we do.
Yeah.